We use the cognitive portion of that as well when it is a fast paced, quick thinking, cognitive development type position that takes a lot of critical thinking skills and some things you just don't want to teach. There are certain base skill set and I would say knowledge base that they need. And then from there, you can teach what they need to learn on the job at that point.
Are you a scaling SaaS founder? Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those who don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where great management isn't just about hitting KPIs. It's knowing when to coach, when to delegate, and when to bribe the team with tacos. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. How B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. Why do so many great employees leave? Not for more money, but for more choice in how they grow. In this episode, we explore what it really means to support diverse career paths inside your organization and why promoting everyone into management isn't the win that you think it is. We dig into how companies unintentionally alienate top talent by assuming upward mobility must mean a leadership role rather than offering lateral growth, skill mastery, or meaningful autonomy. You'll hear why respecting employee preferences, even when that means capping salaries or pausing promotions, can lead to greater happiness, lower turnover, and a more authentic workplace culture. We also tackle a common trap, promoting high performance without preparing them to lead. Because without the right training, today's promotion can quickly become tomorrow's problem. We'll get into the mechanics of succession planning, especially as leadership teams age out, and how future-ready companies are identifying potential over performance. And yes, we talk about hiring practices too. Why skipping structure or hiring friends and family without clear process can create serious long-term consequences. If you're serious about building a culture where your people can thrive, not just rise, this episode is your guide to rethinking growth, leadership, and what success really looks like. Let's dive in. Our founder on Tuesday was Carl Holden, CEO of RankBot, who's pioneering AI-powered SEO. Carl shared how generative agents are automating backlink building and keyword tracking, why SEO is dead is a total myth, and why founders really need to think about content quality in the age of AI. If you've been stuck in search rankings, this episode is your playbook to break out of that into the modern. And our expert guest last week was Matthew Stafford, managing partner at Build, Grow, Scale. He unpacked the science of conversion. From micro commitments to simplifying UX, Matthew revealed the data-driven tactics that has helped hundreds of brands pass the $1 million mark. If you sell online, like product-led growth, his frameworks are essential listening. So if you missed either of those episodes, go back and check them out. My guest today is Michelle Griffin, founder and CEO of Griffin Resources, an end-to-end business solutions provider helping startups and scaling teams fill those gaps without blowing up their budget. From HR outsourcing and recruiting to sales ops and operational support, Michelle's team delivers flexible, hourly help without bloated retainers or long-term contracts. What really sets Michelle apart isn't just her operational savvy. It's how she champions founder-friendly growth. With experience supporting dozens of companies across industries, she knows how to build high-functioning teams, scale culture, and keep your back office lean. Welcome someone who is redefining how founders build smart, flexible teams. Michelle Griffin.
Hey, Michelle, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you built a fractional HR firm, which is very cool, and operates across 5 companies. What makes fractional HR such a powerful model for scaling founders?
So I ended up kind of building it from the idea from business owners. I didn't make it intentionally, like what I was creating as a product or service to market or sell. And as I was just talking to business owners, they kind of described what they wanted from an HR perspective, which my background comes from corporate HR. And when I decided to go into consulting, I thought I would be giving consulting advice or direction and things like that, versus the companies just saying, take an internal email address and just do the work and get the work done. And they really wanted to kind of delegate it. So we've been able to partner with about 85 clients now. And I kind of scaled it to about 40 team members that we have now. And we've started to kind of departmentalize them. So we have, payroll, core HR, talent acquisition, bookkeeping, fractional CFO, and things like that. So as we've brought in the talent, we can lean on their expertise and kind of add what clients are asking for. So I kind of, really did some market research on what it took to keep the hourly rates for what small and mid-sized businesses could afford. And that really helped scale it as well. So I was able to really pivot and change over the years. So I've had the business about 6 years now. And that's really helped keep things, kind of modernized as the economy has changed or industries have been affected in different ways. And so we've been able to, kind of just work our way across the United States. So we have most of our clients are, in multi-states or throughout the continental US. So it was really kind of listening to the companies and clients and really seeing what they needed and then bringing that as a solution versus the other way around, trying to sell a solution.
Nice. I think it's a great model. I think it's absolutely fantastic, especially when you're talking about multiple states.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in a market where startups can't always match big company salaries, what's your playbook for helping small companies compete for top talent?
So that really is something that we have to kind of work on with small to mid-sized businesses, because a lot of times they can't afford to really pay higher paying salaries as some of the bigger corporate companies, pay more into benefits and offer different kinds of benefits. And so we really have to help companies identify what is unique to them, what is their value add to the employees, and why is it a good place to work? And it could be, it is the culture, it is remote work or a hybrid, and they're kind of tapping into the demand of what the employees are looking for what they want out of, the enjoyment of their life. And they want to give back to, an industry that they enjoy, a community that they want to work in. So it's one of the things that we had to face even internally for ourselves as we grew. I want to say it was right around 2022, 23. We started seeing a lot of turnover because my entire company is remote. There's employees that I've had for 4 or 5 years now, and I've never met them in person. And,
Wow.
we all kind of work very well together, obviously in a remote environment. But right around that timeline is when employers were going back to work. Some of them had to force talent back to work. But what we were finding is some people who were forced to work remote didn't, they did well in that environment when they had to, but if they had a choice, they didn't do well in it. And so that really became a problem when they just weren't self-starters. They really couldn't meet the demand of a remote work. Even if it was meetings they set for themselves, they would be missing meetings and things like that. So we had to figure out, we have a lot of turnover. Maybe we're not hiring the right people. We're not finding the right talent for our environment. And so then we literally went out to everyone who worked for us and had especially been there for a couple of years at that point and asked them, why do you work here? Why have you enjoyed working here? What makes us good for you? And then really define that as our culture and kind of keep that going forward. And from that, we started adding in part-time benefits. So from their feedback, we gave part-time people accrual paid time off and a floating holiday based on, a half day, which is, their equivalent of a day off. And, we do a 401k match for part-time people. So we really started listening to them and started treating them, with what we could as part-time people, very similar to full-time people, because they work fractionally as well. Their job is literally fractional. So they, usually work for 4 or 5 different clients to provide that fractional service even to the clients. And so we started listening to them on how they wanted to be treated and start bringing them the value that they wanted. And that's also what could help us bring in new talent, because we're kind of, wanting to make sure that we advertise ourselves properly. And so we kind of took what we learned, obviously being in the same environment as our clients, and really showing them that, you don't have to pay top dollar. You don't have to put all this money into benefits, but you do have to listen to what makes your culture special and unique and why you're in business, and focus on that. And you'll draw in the right talent that fits into your culture and fits into your mission.
I like that. It's a very savvy move, having those conversations. Well, you're a strong advocate for hiring based on culture fit. And I love that you've taken those steps and you've got the part-time people and getting them more incorporated in. And then also just with, the stories about people, going back to work and, being forced into that. And, is that still a fit? Is it not? How do you assess culture fit without falling into to bias traps or gut feel hiring?
That's a really good question. And I think it comes down to defining a few things about the company. And what we did was an internal survey, if you will, or a questionnaire, but we used our leadership coach and that we usually have for all of our, clients, and turned her internal and had her meet with, because at that point, I think we were only about maybe 18 people, 20 people. So It was
Okay.
pretty easy to individually ask people and go through a survey and keep their answers confidential. She did a culmination report and then provided that to myself and my leadership at the time. And so that was something that we took, and then from that decided on keywords, common ideas from the team. And then because we also talked to them about the quality of the work that, they're giving to the clients, what kind of relationships do they have with the clients? Because at some point, especially now that we've gotten a lot bigger, maintaining a culture is intentional, and the face of the company is the, pretty much the day-to-day workers. It's everybody. And it's not something that is kind of reserved for leadership and management, and especially how your reputation is seen and all of the, I would say, people that are networking. So pretty much everybody in the company, when they ask, where do you work or what do you do? Those are very common questions that everybody get asked at, any kind of event or even family functions and things like that. So where people work and what they do is really an important part of their life and who they are. And, obviously how much time you spend at work, even if it is remote, the people that you're interacting with, and those. So each person brings their uniqueness to the table, but, making sure that it is in the same direction and everyone is kind of on, kind of driving the ship in the same direction. And so you definitely have to make sure that everybody in the company understands the mission, but also it believes in being a part of it. And because that's going to be the outwardly part of themselves that kind of shows up every day. So you do have to, as a business and as a business owner, identify that at some point along the way. And because why you went into business and why you started the business, it does not always filter down or trickle down to everybody in the company. And obviously it comes down to what we always say is drinking the Kool-Aid. So it's kind of who
Right.
made the Kool-Aid, make sure that they're drinking the Kool-Aid. And, when we do lose touch, we kind of have to make sure that everybody is there for the right reasons. It can be unique. It can be hard to identify, but it's when you really kind of dig deep and define what makes the business unique, but also why are you in business? And I think if you could answer those questions, and as long as everybody kind of generally gives very similar answers and believes in the same thing, you're on the right track.
I like that. Well, earlier you talked about flexibility in attracting great talent. I think this is really good. The culture fit is a huge part of that as well. But that flexibility in attracting great talent, especially for those with families, what does that look like? What does offering flexibility, look like in operational terms without hurting execution? How do we balance those two?
The flexibility that we have been able to provide to people is, especially being remote, is we got away from the business day, the 8 to 5. And, if if they obviously need to function during business hours, then, we need them to make sure that they're at their, they're available and can make business meetings with clients and other team members. But generally, if it is just desk work, they have the ability to do that whenever they like. And a lot of times with, people with their parents, so they've got their children, they want to be able to leave and, go pick up their kids or drop them off or, attend things with their children. And that was something that we noticed was a huge priority coming out of COVID, is people really reprioritized family. And a lot of times it's also different from an American culture versus like, a foreign culture, European culture. They really tend to focus more on, living and, having work as a way to supply them in a better quality of life, versus a lot of times in the American culture, people tend to, work a lot harder, a lot longer hours. Our culture obviously doesn't have as much time off as, European cultures and things like that. So we tend, in just a natural culture, expect more and longer and harder hours. And coming out of COVID and, international communication, a lot easier for people to understand what other employment laws are out there outside of our country now. So they're starting to realize that we may not be like the best place to work, depending on what kind of benefits you're giving and time off and that kind of stuff. So being able to be flexible even with unpaid time off, like making sure that if someone needs to focus on their family, if they need to take care of a sick or elderly parent or anything like that, just life becomes a big priority and work needs to support them. So I've talked a lot to the clients about, people want to be treated like people. There's a quiet quitting culture for a reason. Like, people are tired of being treated like cogs in a wheel and being seen as like a worker or a thing or someone to supply money. And if you treat them, obviously with respect, but also just really an empathetic understanding of what's going on in their day-to-day life is really important. So just having that flexibility and not saying, oh, we are demanding this of you because the company needs this from you, versus, we understand you have a wedding, you have, important things that are important to you, and just supporting people and really giving them the space to thrive and supporting them, that will generate, loyalty, and making sure that, you're there for them, you understand them, even with it's, a stress level at work. People don't want to be like pushed and just felt like, oh, well, I'm just going to push you as far as I can, versus like the company really needs you to step up because we are running thin, but we're going to hire someone to help you out. Like, give us a little bit. It takes a minute to hire people. We're looking for the right person, making sure that they know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel versus just pushing them to the limits. And so, being really transparent with them if they are overworked, let them know you're aware that they're overworked and you're going to be doing something about it. But people often talk about, or complain about being asked to step up and do extra work after someone leaves, and then they're not being paid or they're not being compensated or even being, acknowledged for that extra work. So, just kind of making sure that you're acknowledging that in their work life as well.
So good. That's really important. I mean, just communicating.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really, really helpful first step. What does a smart hiring process look like for a founder, maybe with no recruiter, no applicant tracking system, and a tight budget? How should they prioritize and screen?
So the things that you can do on a tight budget, and that's a very good question, is there's a few things to help you make sure that you're making a good hire, and it doesn't necessarily require purchasing any kind of assessments or tools, or those obviously scientifically end up increasing your odds. But you can do something called a structured interview, and which is basically just having your set of questions that you're going to ask every single candidate. And as long as you're essentially being able to measure the same questions, and obviously you can have follow-up questions, additional questions, and things like that. But if you have your 10 base questions that you're asking everybody, you have a fair way to assess, and you're kind of getting out of that gut feeling of, what it is you're looking for, and you have something to compare and contrast against the different candidates. Making sure that if you are posting a job and you're able to bring in a lot of the resumes and things like that and kind of filtering through them, it's going to take a lot of time. So making sure we usually spend, honestly, It's not much time, 15, 20 seconds on a resume, because you're just skimming to see if everything is on there that you need on there. And then kind of creating a pile of, resumes from there, and then spending more time on the resumes that look good. And then you kind of spend several minutes actually reading through and identifying what you want on their resume and their background, and then doing a phone screen. So you're kind of doing your own step process to get them into a kind of a short list, and then having them either come in for an in-person interview or a longer, phone screen and things like that, video chat. You want to make sure they can show up right and meet your expectations. But, getting away from an unstructured interview, which is just free for all meetings, versus having, your structured interviews. And if you can afford to add assessments, that significantly increases the validity of the hiring practice. So that usually helps too, if you can add in some kind of behavioral assessment. If you're posting on Indeed, they typically have some kind of different assessments that you can tack on to the job and things like that too. So if you can put a little bit of extra money into it, there's some out there that you can kind of afford to add on, or see if there's one that you can kind of download and ask people to complete. You have to kind of score it by hand, but there's ways to add in assessments that can help you understand, like, beyond just your questions and things like that too. So that, and by significantly, I mean that changes your validity of hiring people from like 10% to like 50%. Like, it really increases your odds. Structured interviews help you go from like a 10% odds to like a 25, 30% odds. So as you add in additional validity steps like structured interviews and assessments, your odds of finding the right person increase.
That's good. And the assessments, is it like behavioral or cognitive assessments, or some of both of those? And is it just getting the right hire, or is retention and team performance help as well? Are you missing key relationships that could transform your leadership? Most leaders are. They just can't see it. And here's what shocked me. The most successful leaders aren't lone heroes. They're the center of 4 specific relationships that multiply their impact while preserving their sanity. You're probably like everybody else, drowning in connections, but starving for real support. And it's creating a silent epidemic of leadership burnout among executives just like you. So, take my free assessment at thecaptainskeys.com. Discover which critical relationships you're missing in under 5 minutes, and then grab my new book, The Captain's Keys, part Netflix drama, part game-changing blueprint for leadership that actually sustains you. One CEO called it the owner's manual I never got. So stop flying blind and see what you're missing.
One that we like to use, and not to like plug a product in here, but we really tend to go towards predictive index for many reasons. It's affordable. Okay. We can use ours, and then we can kind of help keep the cost down for the clients as well. And with that, it has both a behavioral and a cognitive. We use the behavioral pretty much with every job match. And what's nice about it is you can create a job match. So you can identify the basic tasks and behavioral needs of the job, and then the assessment that the candidates take is based on their behavior, and then it physically matches their natural disposition to the job match you've created. And then it kind of tells you whether or not they're a fit. And what's important about that is it needs to just be a piece of the puzzle. It shouldn't be a yes or no. They're not hired because they're not a fit, because it does help you identify how they may not be an exact match. They may have skills you didn't think to look for, or they may just be a fit in a way that is not going to work for you at all, but you'll be able to understand that. And there's also questions that it will give you to follow up in additional interviews that are unique to that person, that identify a skill gap. And if those are skills that you truly do need, and it really is a no, versus they may just show up differently at work than what was assessed. So we use that for the best, I would say, like job matching we can do for hiring. We use the cognitive portion of that as well when it is a fast-paced, quick thinking, cognitive like development type position that takes a lot of, critical thinking skills and things like that. Some things you just don't want to teach. So when that's really involved and you need, there's certain base skill set and I would say knowledge base that they need. And then from there you can teach, you can teach what they need to learn for on the job at that point. And so we tend to look at it from that perspective. How fast can they think on their feet? How much do they need to know and learn and grow? So that's where the cognition part comes into play too. So we'll use that, but we use that more sparingly depending on what the job is and if it's truly needed, because the behavioral assessment is very quick. It's very easy. It doesn't kind of give too many road bumps in the way to getting the job versus like a cognitive or a disc or some kind of communication tool. A lot of those assessments are leadership assessments. They are 35, 45 minutes to take the assessment, which can be significant barriers to the candidate. And some of them may say, never mind, I don't need to go through all these hoops for this job. So you have to kind of really keep the candidate experience in mind.
When they don't do the assessment, do you think that's a sign like, they're not that interested in the job, or do you think it really is? Are barriers a good thing to have in the application process, or should it be really easy? Because somebody could say, well, if they really wanted the job, they would be willing to go and do the assessment and do what it takes to get there, and that tells you how they're going to operate in the role as well.
And that becomes like a different stereotype. It kind of goes both ways, and we have a lot of conversations about that when identifying the right setup for the candidate experience.
Sure.
Some roles, especially if it is going to be a leadership role, management roles, really important to the organization. You have a lot of ask of them. A lot of times it might be multiple interviews. It could be group interviews and multiple assessments, because the assessments may be used for different purposes. They're validated for different times of the candidate process. One might be for the hiring process. Another might be for a communication tool to identify how you're going to fit in with the department or the leadership team. It could be a skill-based assessment that is going to determine if you can perform the job that you're being asked to perform. And so, unfortunately, there can be a lot of barriers. So you have to start thinking about what is the most significant piece and what do you really want to ask them to do? Because at some point, I've seen clients ask them to turn in written documents or like ask them to complete some kind of hypothetical assignment so they can see kind of how they might write some copy, or how would they turn in especially if it might be a tech position, they may be asked to do. We did like GUI tests and things like that at a tech job, so we would kind of give them certain assignments, and so it could be so much as like even like a almost like a working interview. And so it could be, you really want to find out how far are they willing to go? Are they really loyal? Is this a good high paying job that there's a lot of demand and a lot of competition for? And it's really making sure that they're going to fit the role as much as they want to be a part of it and you want them. So there's that aspect. If it is a lower paying position, if it is something that is fairly common or easy to hire for, it doesn't take a lot of skill set, you really can't put a lot of barriers in place because they're like, I'll go over here and get a job.
Right.
That's not going to make me do that. And so that's where it's kind of like you have to pick and choose your battles on how you want to choose your talent, but then being competitive in the environment and making sure that it's the right reputation that you're putting out there for the candidate experience.
That's really good, because it is role specific. There's some where you do want to have a lot of hoops because it matters,
Mhm.
and there's other ones that you don't, because you don't want that friction in there. You want to make it easy. I think it depends on the roles.
Mhm.
That's a really good answer. What insights do founders often overlook when designing their team structures for growth?
They often will hire or promote people into a role that were good at their jobs, but aren't taught or know how to manage people. So that is the most common way to promote a person, is to find someone that does the job the best and then start working them up in a career path. And it ends up, being great for that person, but they have no people skills, they have no management skills, and one of the things that we often promote, and why we have a leadership coach on available for our clients, is obviously something they've asked for, but they have started to realize that if they want to put someone on a career path to then manage people, let's say a year out, they know that that's something that they want to move towards. They can kind of put them in training ahead of the promotion so that they learn those skills, so that when they get in the position, they are able to manage people in a way that the company wants them being managed and the culture is maintained. Sometimes, which is not often, they're that proactive, but most of the time it's always after the fact. Someone gets promoted and they're like, and now we need you to also go to training, if they're even willing to give them training. A lot of times you end up with toxic managers, you'll end up with turnover, you'll end up with burnout. You're going to cost the company a lot of money by just not training or having the right management in positions. And there's I would say, a very delicate balance between making sure that you've got someone that knows how to do the job. Obviously, that's very important, but leading people. I was surprised when I was new in my career. It was my first HR position. I was, my title was HR coordinator. So I was a very beginner level. And I was working with an executive director in the business, and he had never performed the function of the tech support that he was managing. But he was one of the
Wow.
best directors that the company had. He always kept them engaged. And we're talking tech support level 1, like the crap job of
That's
tech support.
great.
And he would have, little competitions. He would do pizza parties. Like the team knew each other. And it was a very large department, about 100 people. And he
Wow.
was really good at, I remember them putting little, I don't know what to call them, pogs on the ground. And they had these sticky things that they could throw at them and bring them, kind of catch them. And they just had a bunch of
Okay.
people standing around catching pogs. And underneath the pogs, he had written things to win, a day off or, extra whatever. And, he just had all these little awards for them, might have been $50 or whatever it was. And of course, it was a huge riot in the hallway when this happened. And he just had really unique ways. And I remember asking him, why he was such a good manager when he had never physically performed tech support before. And I was baffled that he said, you don't have to know what they do or how they do their job to manage them well. They obviously have team leads that knew how to do their
Yep.
job and could physically help them with the tactical part of their job. But his job was motivation and loyalty and, communication and some of the, more important aspects of the larger, idea of the company and the department. And that's really where I learned and understood that while it is great to know exactly, you've been in their shoes, you can help them with their questions if they have, very specific information, like what do I do when this happens? You have people to answer those questions, but to really keep them, loyal and reducing turnover and, keeping the department running or keeping the company running, that really does take more of a people skill.
I think you're right. Promoting somebody who's done the job, and see this all the time. Sales is a really big example. I see it all the time. A great salesperson gets moved into sales management, and it's just a completely different skill.
Hmm.
And it's not the right match for a lot of people. Some people can make the transition really well, but it's just a very different skill. But you think a doer is going to be a great manager, but that's not always the case. In fact, a lot of times it's not.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the person may want the promotion because they think, "Oh, I'll be salaried or, and I won't be commissioned anymore or it's going to be an
Yeah,
easier job." And, they end up not liking it, but they're kind of, we're calling it golden handcuffs. They're kind of stuck in a role that pays them really well and even they aren't happy doing the job either. And that can come
yeah,
across too, and you'll end up with really toxic environments, but it's it's also important to make sure that that person stays happy and that they, and if someone is really good at just doing their job and they don't want to move up, that you respect that and keep them in a role that they're happy in, and you find other ways to keep them engaged and motivated. And even if you do have to salary cap them, there's certain conversations you can have about they're happy in that salary in that role, as long as you might see a economic change if there's an increase in just cost of living changes, but they may not need a promotional change. And I remember having to walk managers through that when, on the annual review templates that I would create, it would always include discussions about their future and their planning. And that way, managers should never be surprised by someone's growth plan and career path. They should always, be very aware of what they want. And so if someone is saying, I don't want to be a manager or I do want to be a manager, you should be having those conversations, for the entire time that they're working there. Like, what do they want to do? And then how do you help them get there and align that with the company's goals?
What do you think about building out career paths that are not management specific, but that let them continue and just advance in the doing?
I remember when I first was thrown off by that, when I was, in the corporate world of HR, I had someone that was in accounting and we wanted her, she was obviously great at the job. We really wanted her to be like a team lead. We needed to grow the company. We wanted to bring in other accountants and, either accounts payable, accounts receivable. And she had no problem training them. She didn't mind being a trainer, but she did not want to be a team lead. She didn't want to be a manager. She didn't want additional stress. She was really the type of person to show up, do her job, obviously very well, and wanted to be able to go home and not have to worry about work, not be on call, and just do her job and
Sure.
go home and have nights and weekends and that kind of thing. And that was my first time seeing someone really stand up to against what corporate wanted, which was, we want to push you to do these things. And she was like, absolutely not. Like, don't do it. I'll do what you need me to do. I'll definitely train them, but I'm not going to like push them, don't push me into like doing other stuff. And so that was, I was, since especially when I was younger, I was like very, very motivated to like grow and like climb the corporate ladder. To see someone the complete opposite of that was my, first time in my career seeing that. But I learned a lot about, some people won't be that demanding or outspoken about it. They, especially if they're introverted and they, not maybe not have the voice to stand up for themselves and actually say what they want. So expanding the business and, identifying what future org structures are needed. So kind of creating an org chart that it with holes in it, like to intentional holes, and then, kind of career pathing people into additional titles and kind of putting salary bands with that works really well with large companies in an industry that you can have a career growth. I did that with a company that was in the construction industry, and we did something a little unique. We had internal titles and we had external titles. And external titles, everyone was called a construction manager. Internally, we had a level 1 through 5. And so if they were, newer, we had this entire path that put them like a year before they, even got to do anything with the construction management. And then they had a caseload that was only, maybe 8 houses, no more than 10. And then as they got more proficient, and they were also partnered with a mentor, which was like a level 5. And then everything in between was more houses, more chances for, bonuses and things like that, the better that they were able to hold more houses. And then obviously they could go from, making 60, $70,000 all the way up to, well into 6 figures is kind of where we were career pathing them. And with that, we were able to kind of just decide where people wanted to go. And obviously, what my initial intent to create a mentor program with that was people that were starting to age out. And if they're closer to retirement, we really wanted to continue to use their skill set and for them to kind of pass on their knowledge. But they're just not as, I would say, able to work so many outside hours, carry a caseload of so many, houses in the community and things like that. It worked sort of well, but not everybody wanted to take on that role of mentorship either. And so a lot of them, even though we were close to retirement, they still wanted to keep their current case, caseload of their houses and things like that. So it was something I'd have like theories on like, I think this will work. And it did work in some aspects, just not the way I exactly thought it would, because not everybody wanted to take on those roles. So we would, kind of have them as opportunities available. And then we would try to make sure to use those behavioral assessments or communication tools to partner people with the right mentor and mentee, because that was also something we learned to try to like not have, you know, clashes of personality. We learned that was a problem too. And then also it kind of helped us create kind of a succession plan if people are retiring or needing to, you know, move into other roles. You know, we could start figuring out, you know, succession planning into certain areas of the company. Eventually we had to do it with leadership as well, because obviously our, you know, the leadership team was aging and we needed to start a 5 to 10 year succession plan. And that we had to identify, you know, which talent was going to be the best for those roles versus which talent is, you know, obviously their first thought is people are performing, the best performer, the top performer, that's who we want.
Right, right.
And then, you know, coming to find out they don't want it.
Yeah, it happens a lot. And I like that, where there's some sort of a path that doesn't, they're not forced to do something that they're not really equipped to do and they don't want to do. And they can keep high performing exactly where they are and just continue to grow and develop and add value. Really smart. Well, for a founder that's hiring their first few team members, what's the one decision they can make early that'll pay off most in retention, over the long term and then team performance too?
Try not to hire a friend or family member. So
Oh, that's a good one.
typically with small businesses, they start off by hiring people they know, which is great. We have had to work, well, even in my own company, I've had to let friends go and things like that. But also like we've had to partner with companies that needed to let a father-in-law go, a godfather go. Like they've brought in people, a previous boss was someone's employee that we had to help let go. So they really think, you know, this is someone that I've done business with before, or I know they know what they're doing and, you know, that kind of thing. And so they'll bring them on. And it could either be that they take advantage of them or they just don't know, you know, that particular company or market or industry and it doesn't work out as well. So, you know, there's usually it doesn't happen until about 10, 12 people that you have to start doing traditional recruiting to find people you don't know because your network has kind of depleted. So if you can do some of those like traditional recruiting early or putting those recruiting candidate experiences in place regardless of who you're hiring. So if you start thinking I want, you know, this type of person, I need them to have these skills and I want to ask these you know, interview questions, even if it is someone you do know, put them through a traditional, you know, interview process so that, you know, you feel like you're making the right decision, which even I would say for my own company, it's hard for me to do because I'll have someone that I network with or I know really well. And then they're like, can I come work for you? And now the company is big enough where I'm like, it's not my decision anymore. We have managers in place, we have a recruitment process. And I'm like, I will send you to the recruiter. And if they say no, then I'm sorry, the answer is no. So, you know, it's one of those things where if you just kind of put things in place early on and you are, obviously it takes a lot of communication and things like that too, so that you are treating everyone fairly and things like that too. Because something that I've seen in businesses, obviously there's nepotism and that can be seen as unfair. So if you do go
Sure.
through regular hiring practices, and then if it is someone's family member that you just like someone's, you know, brother and, you know, whoever, that's something that we saw a lot, even in bigger companies where they're like, well, it'll be a referral program. They'll give a referral bonus and things like that to like, you know, family members. And we had to eventually put in an anti-nepotism policy so that people could, you know, have a fairness of it. And it's very easy just to hire people, you know, but if they are the most qualified and the best person, then, you know, absolutely make that decision, but still make sure that you're making sure it's the right decision for your business.
So good. Well, where can people learn more about you and about Griffin Resources online?
Our website is the best, which would be griffin-resources.com.
Outstanding. And we'll make sure and link that in the show notes. And
Thank
super
you.
valuable. Michelle, thank you for being on SaaS Fuel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again, Michelle, for coming on the show and sharing your journey and insights. You can learn more about Michelle and Griffin Resources at griffin-resources.com. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well. It's at Champion Leadership. You know, thought leaders share. Share this episode with your favorite growth hacker who once A/B tested their out of office message. Everyone who shares this week gets a coupon for one free viral moment. It's redeemable on Tuesdays during Mercury retrograde and after you hit product market fit, or hit fit-ish. What does it really take to scale Europe's fastest growing AI startup? Our next guest, Alberto Rizzoli, CEO of V7, shares how he is building an AI powerhouse used by governments, researchers, and enterprise teams around the world. From CES awards to presidential honors, Alberto's story is proof that AI and impact can go hand in hand. Then after that, we have Thanos. Yep, with the gauntlet and all, Thanos Diakakis will join us to share what he's learned from decades of leading dev teams, from scaling Uber's jump bikes to accelerating startup launches. Your product roadmap feels a little stuck in the mud. This episode is your traction plan. I will see you next time, and as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.